when I first encountered you at the Stoa, I kind of assorted you into the category of like crazy person. Because like there's always like a few of those at all these public events. You're like, this guy is insane. Everything has some aspect of inauthenticity to it. You have to accept that. And I'm just like, I don't accept it. There's somewhere inside me, there's like this banished child. There's like this like little boy I can't find anymore. I became this overcompensating, aggressive, almost tyrannical masculine in order to become strong. Men really spend way too much time in their head nowadays. They know how to be embodied, but they really don't know how to sit and be embodied. You can feel the power when you get women in the space. And if it goes away, this thing's not going to survive. It's like, no, you have a responsibility with everything you do as being a parent to the world and being a parent to the future, like whether or not you have children. People don't know how to talk to each other. Like, and if you can solve that, you can actually solve all the other problems.
I want to build on that, but literally I have to upgrade my Zoom right now or the meeting's going to end. So please bear with me.
You're going to upgrade it live?
You know what's funny? If I keep this in the episode.
Time's running out, Albert. Like you have 6 minutes.
Welcome back, Nomads. You're either a true believer, crazy, or a bit of both, because we're now at episode 5. I have a treat today. We have our very first guest from the Stoa, Arran Rogerson. Don't you dare call him Aaron. Funny thing about Arran, he was actually the first human being to follow me on Twitter. I started a new account this past spring. I had like 2 followers. I'm pretty sure they were both porn troll accounts. One day, I'm like, oh, I have a new follower, Arran Rogerson. Oh, isn't he that metamodern masculinity guy from the Stoa? I'll follow him back. And over the next few months, you could kind of sense from our tweets that we were both working on something behind the scenes. Lo and behold, in October, he releases the first episode of the Torch YouTube series on a Saturday. And on the very next day, Sunday, I released Noetic Nomads. What are the odds? So Arran's an awesome guy. In many ways, I see him as almost the complete opposite of me in terms of personality. But as you'll see in this episode, we have in common the fact that we're both weirdos, outsiders to the system, and we both said, game A, and all that noise. His work with his podcast, YouTube series, and sessions at the Stoa involve all that chthonic, subterranean stuff, like Jung, the shadow, masculinity, and the meaning of life. I really loved editing this episode. I know this is technically my show, but it's honestly one of my favorite podcasts I've listened to in a long time. We go over Arran's path from high school track star to a wannabe PT to bartending to finding the light through a Joe Rogan podcast with Jordan Peterson, what it means to be a metamodern man, the awesome women at the Stoa and the Sensemaking space, and how we need more of them if we want these spaces to survive. And Arran was even gracious enough to armchair psychoanalyze me. Spoiler, I'm actually not a psychopath. You can watch on YouTube or listen on podcasts, and be sure to check out noeticnomads.org, where you can read articles written by the community and check out the latest events happening in the noosphere. And if you're not a trollbot, follow me on Twitter at noeticnomads.org. Okay, on to this fantastic episode with Arran. Okay, we are recording. Welcome everyone to another brand new episode of Noetic Nomads. I'm Albert Kim, the inspiration for crazy rich Asians, minus the rich part. And with me today is our very first guest from the Stoa. What the hell took so long? As co-host of the Golden Shadow podcast, creator of the YouTube series, The Torch, and regular facilitator at the new digital sangha, The Stoa, our guest is an embodiment of the meta-modern man who asks deep questions on the nature of conflict, our individual and collective shadows, the archetypal manifestations which drive human behavior, and the primordial depths out of which the masculine and feminine arise. But even more impressively, this man is a god on the running track. As captain of the varsity cross-country team at Alameda High, he led his team to the state championships in 04 and 05 and was himself, as a junior, crowned ACCAL League champion. Nomads, please help me in introducing the man with the luscious locks this side of Jared Leto and my very first Twitter follower who wasn't a Russian trollbot. He is the one, the only, Arran Rogerson. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks, Albert. That was the greatest introduction I've ever received by far. And you did your homework, so I appreciate that.
I mean, look, like when I dig in, it's just like, yes, I mean, you heard it. Everybody, Arran, he's a god on the track, on the mic of the mind. So, I mean, Arran, so what I want to start off with today, I don't know if you remember our first interaction at the Stoa. I think I have an idea what it was, but what is
Mm.
your recollection of what it was?
Yeah, this is funny. When I first encountered you at the Stoa, I kind of assorted you into the category of like crazy person. Because like there's always like a few of those at all these public events. You always get kind of like a few people who are sort of like unhinged. You're kind of like,
Mm,
okay, like that guy's a little crazy, and
yeah.
got to watch out for him. Because you had so much energy, and you were so
Mm,
excited, and you were like kind of like shouting all these things. But it didn't take long for me to realize that you were actually like a really smart, really nice guy, and that the
appreciate it.
energy was actually like really a virtue. But
Mm.
that was my first impression, was like, this guy is insane, and I'm kind of worried about what he's gonna do at this like public thing. But you ended up being one of the many hearts at the Stoa that keeps it alive.
Oh, wow.
Pumps the blood, pumps the energy through the Stoa, and makes it function as a body. So it's really been cool to see what you do and get to know you.
Wow, that's, I mean, I really appreciate that because
Yeah.
I mean, I know like I know with the work you do, I mean, like you're deep into like, the unconscious, the shadow and all that.
Mhm.
And I am afraid as hell that you see into me. I know that you see deep into me, right? And I'm worried sometimes that like, oh my God, because I know I have a dark shadow. I have a dark past, right? But it's just like, is that me? Like, am I really this crazy egotistical, this kind of person, or is that light really inside of me? So I'm glad that other people can see. So, and I'm glad and I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, man, you're full of love. That's what I say.
I mean, yeah, awesome. I mean, thank you. And I mean, and do you know? I mean, what specifically was this session? Do you remember the first session it was where you first encountered my craziness?
Um, I don't honestly. My recollection is that it was a bigger conversation. It might have been like Rebecca or something. I don't
Oh,
remember really having like a one-on-one interaction with you. I just
mm,
remember you speaking up.
uh,
Uh, and yeah, I don't know. Do you remember what session it was?
well, yeah, I mean, like I probably saw you in the sessions before. Like
Yeah.
I kind of spoke on the mic maybe before that, and maybe you were in the chat. But the actual first interaction was actually it was an Ariel Friedman's The Dangerous Space.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a talk on like we're speaking on like masculinity, and the topic was like femininity, right? And then
Yeah.
I was kind of going on like I made a statement. I said, like I think we should move beyond gender, beyond sexuality. We should go post gender, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
not buy into what I saw as maybe like archaic,
mm,
maybe modernist interpretations of what masculine and feminine is. And that was
yeah.
my mindset back then. And since then, and actually with your prompting, Aaron, I've actually kind
Yeah.
of started to buy into it a bit more. And then
Mm.
I said my piece, and then right after, this is the first time I heard you speak. You're like, wait a minute, there's something. Wait a minute, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't be throwing that out because there's something divine even
I
about
remember this.
the masculine
Yeah.
feminine. Now you remember this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what exactly do you think is so important, so it's like integral about the masculine and the feminine, especially like at this point in time?
Yeah. I mean, this is it's a tricky question. A lot of this is semantics, right? It's like, what do we mean when we say masculine? What do we mean when we say feminine? I think that it's just factually true that there are sort of two poles amongst humans, masculine and feminine. Like, I just
Mm,
think that's like a true thing, and whether you think it's right or wrong, it's true, and like you have to deal with it. So um masculine and feminine is something that's been depicted in our mythology. It's been something that's been the division of labor between men and women has been present through all of human history.
mm,
uh, and women are charged with an extremely important sacred role, which is being pregnant and bringing life into the world.
mm.
And it is like the most important, most beautiful role there is, I would say. um, and that creates like a fundamental difference between men and women. Women get pregnant, men don't, and like that's That's just a fact. It's like there's no way around that. So
Mm.
that there creates so much vibrance in the different patterns between men and women. This getting pregnant, having the child, and we have to acknowledge that. And I think there's all kinds of ways you can also look at the universe as having sort of this yin yang function that kind of ties into masculine and feminine. It's a pretty abstract, and you know, I don't want to put too much stock in just sort of like the cosmic dualism of, you know, the world, but there is something there going on that masculine and feminine kind of align into, that is really how you would describe any entity that it grows and emerges and evolves. It has this yin yang thing going on, and men and women are kind of oscillations of that yin yang. That's the way I see it. But there's always room for exploration. There's always room for change, and the, you know, definitely not trying to be reductive when it comes to masculinity and femininity. And I'm definitely not trying to limit people's capacity for empowerment when it comes to masculinity and femininity. I just think it's something that's kind of important to acknowledge rather than just throw out because it's convenient, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see what you're saying. And during doing my research for the show, I was listening to, you know, various episodes of your podcast, and you're the one on the Golden Shadow, which you host with your friend Alyssa, on masculinity and the masculine and the feminine.
Yeah,
Ooh, that was so great. And then you went into exactly what you're talking about here about how the female, the feminine, is so integral. Like, she is the one who gives birth. And then the men, right? They're kind of like expendable. You know, they could go off to war. You know, they could have like 90% of your men die, but you got a couple back who can impregnate all the females, and that's what we need. And you talk about, you know, the men, you know, save the women and children first. You know, it's just like we're just the tools, you know, to go out, hunt, build, and do that kind of stuff. And like what I wanted to talk about in your work at the Stoa, it deals specifically on a metamodern masculinity. Now, could you go on what you mean by or what could be a metamodern masculinity?
Yeah, I mean, the event that I wanted to do at the Stoa originally was just a men's group because I could sense there was sort of a hunger for discussing biological differences between men and women, or discussing you know, the conversation around feminism and Me Too. You could sense that that was already happening, like in the chats at events that weren't associated with masculinity or femininity at all. So I pitched it to Peter, and one way that I knew like I could you know, make Peter get like a meta boner is just like throw in some word like, how about metamodern masculinity?
Oh no, how dare you.
And he fell for it. He fell for it, and he allowed me to facilitate my own event because of that. Anyways, no, metamodern is, I mean, it's a word being thrown around a lot now, especially at the Stoa, and I think it's at a stage where we kind of don't even know what metamodern really refers to yet, but it's kind of like an interesting thing to explore. People have different opinions on what metamodernism is. I don't want to claim that I'm like from like a metamodern school or anything like that. That's definitely not true. But there is this notion that there is sort of the status quo, let's say, and modernism is sort of the status quo. There's like sort of a certain way that we think about truth. There's a certain way that we think about objective reality. There's a certain way that we think about men and women as being something that like, this is already established what men and women are. And then there's something that kind of reacts to that status quo. That, and postmodernism is sort of reactionary in the sense that it responds to modernism and it critiques it, and it says, maybe we don't know what's true, maybe we don't know what's real, maybe we should think about other options, maybe we should look at other sources to try and make sense of what's happening here. And so metamodern is a response to postmodernism, let's say, which reacts too strongly, and it just says all of modernism is bullshit. Throw it out. Doesn't work. Which, you know, is not the right approach. So metamodernism is oscillating between these forces of the status quo, the thing that kind of maintains structure, and the thing that tears down the structure. Because if you have both of those in balance, what you're doing is growing. Like the individual grows by maintaining a structure, but allowing itself to adapt, allowing itself to shed what doesn't belong, and then rebuild, and then shed what doesn't belong and rebuild. And a healthy society needs to have that, right? So metamodernism is this idea of mediating between these forces of modernism and postmodernism, or mediating between forces of the status quo, the structure, the order, and the sort of chaos disorder taking apart in order to be rebuilt. So it's basically just like wisdom. That's what I would say metamodernism is. And metamodern masculinity would be not the modern man, not the postmodern philosopher, artist, cynical man, but the wise man who understands the need for both.
Yeah, so like the way I kind of see it, like the integration, it's like having all the tools in your toolkit and kind of like using them wisely, you know, so with sagacity. And Christian in the chat, hello Christian, thank you for joining us. He points out like he says it's amazing to see more men doing collective presencing and somatic practices, and I think this is kind of has to do with a metamodern masculinity as well. I just did my first collective presencing with Rhea Beck last week. Yeah. And I'm from by recommendation from my friend Tia, who I did my second episode with, and it was amazing. And like, here's the thing, like, and then Nora Bateson and Rhea Beck and a whole bunch of women were at the Stoa on Friday, talk about how, you know, men, you know, the Sensemaking space is so masculine. It's just very, it's still it's lacking like a modernist kind of masculine type of vibe, and they're all stuck in their head, and they're like, you know what? They gotta stop talking it, we can stop living in your head. And they got to move into your bodies and to be embodied. So, yeah, I mean, this whole thing, like this whole emergent masculinity is basically what is going on. And actually is what I see between you and I, because I mean, okay, so I want to know your thoughts on this, right? Because when I first, so first impression of you, right? When I was like when you first started doing your Stoa session, you're like, oh, you're the metamodern masculinity guy, right? But in the old, maybe traditional, you know, understanding of what a masculine, who would be talking about masculinity, you kind of like, you see all these like these men's rights activists and everything. They're all like these gruff macho dudes. They're like FUs, like you know, the SJWs and all that, right? But the you metamodern is just like, you're like this like reserved guy with like long, again, beautiful locks, and it's just like it doesn't come off as like what people traditionally see as masculine. And again, like, but and also it's like the same thing with me. And on the other sense, like I maybe in some sense embody some of those traditionally modern, like the traditionally modern archetype of like, you know, like I'm aggressive, I'm brash, I'm in your face. I like, you know, lifting weights, and I'm like kind of like go, but I'm also like a vegan, and I also happen to be a celibate, and I'm also full of love. So this whole thing is kind of like, I guess we're both kind of being meta modern. So I would like, what do you think about that?
I think that's, you know, the Stoa is a good example of a place where there's a lot of masculine energy, but it's not the stereotypical masculine energy that you would, you might call like a sausage fest normally, or like it's a bunch of dudes that are just like broing out and like doing kind of shallow, superficial, or like shadow masculine type activities where like maybe they're kind of like ragging on each other and testing each other and kind of establishing a hierarchy and being competitive and maybe talking about their sexual conquests and stuff like that. And that's like kind of what we normally think of when we think of men hanging out together. Maybe not normally, but that's definitely a stereotype. And at the Stoa, you have all this masculine energy, but it's certainly not that. It's the masculine energy of wisdom. It's the masculine energy of like patience. It's the masculine energy of curiosity and trying to be someone who is more like a father as opposed to like the young upstart. So there is what I would say is there's emergence of a new kind of masculinity. Maybe it's not new, but at least cyclically, we're returning to a place where there, I think, are men who are climbing back out of sort of the background and exploring all these virtuous masculine archetypes that we need so badly in our world. And like I said, like the virtuous father is something you really need for any group to work. The virtuous father is something you really need for any tribe, any society to work. And we need men to become virtuous fathers, and we need men who are they're patient and they're protective and they provide structure and they can lead and they can guide people, but they're not tyrannical and they're not playing these zero-sum games, but they are trying to bring everyone around them into personhood, raise people up like the father raises his child up, and he makes them grow strong, and he provides that important guidance, the boundaries, the little push that says like, come on son, you can do it. That's what we need men to become. And that failure of men to become that is really quite dangerous, I would say, because then you just get shadow men, and shadow men are just trolls and they just want to destroy things because they're angry. And I think that energy at the Stoa, for instance, is one of men trying to become virtuous fathers or virtuous shamans, you might say. That's another way to think of it. And part of that involves exploring the masculine body, getting out of your head, like you're saying. Yeah. I mean, men really spend way too much time in their head nowadays. Men have difficulty being embodied without sort of being like in some competitive, aggressive situation. Like men, you can see men be embodied if you put them like on a soccer field. Yeah. Like they know what to do. Or you can see them being embodied when they get drunk and start fighting. It's like they know how to be embodied, but they don't know but they really don't know how to sit and be embodied, or just to be present with others and be embodied. That's more of a female thing, or more of a feminine thing, I should say. So the collective presencing with men is something that I think is being explored, and it's really important. Do you know how to understand your physicality as a man without having to like punch things? And that's what we're exploring. I think that's so important.
Yeah, I mean, so much. I mean, like this reminds me of like, I mean, like I know you're deep into Jung's work, and like at Sensemaking 101 this summer, by recommendation of Robert, the first guest, Robin on Noetic Nomads, he recommended Robert Moore's King Warrior Magician Lover. And like that changed my life. When you talk about like the mature masculine archetype, like, and again, it's like when you talk about the father being like a father, not being like, not necessarily playing like the hero or being like I forget the other archetypes, but the shadow archetypes.
Yeah.
For each of the King Warrior Magician Lover, it just being masculine and stepping into your fullness, and this embodiment thing. It's very interesting because I know right now we're talking about like metamodern masculinity and Jung, and I'd love to get into that with you. But I think I want to go back to the origin story of Arran Rogerson, because we're going to talk about embodiment. As I mentioned in your intro, you were kind of like a high school track and field kind of demigod. And so I'm assuming that you do have some, knowledge of embodiment in that realm. So I just wanted to go back to, where you were before all this happened. And because I read in my research at one point, you were going to be a physical therapist. Talk about embodiment. My brother is a physical therapist, so I know that kind of realm. So I was just wondering, like what social group were you a part of in high school, and how did that affect your trajectory in life? This is what I'm curious about.
No, this is good, because I think my story is actually a fairly interesting one. And there's a lot about the pursuits I've had in my life that like no one at the Stoa really knows about, because why would they? Like we don't get very personal. Yeah, we don't get very personal at the Stoa though, right? We really don't talk too much about people's personal struggles or problems or their pasts, and maybe that's a good thing, maybe not, I don't know. But my experience as a young person has been one of being a satellite. That's sort of like a metaphor that I've used for a long time now, and that's what a lot of my friends have kind of like called me as sort of like a joke. I mean, like at Burning Man, like I had like a burner name, And I don't know if you're
Alternative
familiar
name. I
with.
love that.
Yeah, but sometimes people like choose nicknames at Burning Man. Like one year, my burn name was Satellite because that's been my experience as a young person, which is someone who has never fit in and never felt comfortable in a group, but been very social and been a member of a lot of groups. So
I see.
in high school, when I really started to kind of like socially blossom, I guess you could say. And even before that, there's interesting stories. I mean, like middle school was like really terrible for me. Like it was like awful, and I felt like such a loser, and I had really low self-esteem. But high school, I started to blossom, and I had friends who were kind of like the stoner slacker types, and I was like part of that crew. But I was also friends with the cross country and track people because I was an athlete, and so they were a little more, prestigious, ambitious, and had their shit together. And I was also had like a crew of like really smart academic Asians that like I hung out with all the time, and
Cool.
I would just sort of like go from group to group and just
Oh,
sort of
so
like.
that's why we get along. Okay, now I get it, Arran. All right, all right. Yeah.
um, but that's how I was. I didn't really have a clique. I just had many cliques, and yeah, I mean, cross country was something that really changed my life in a really positive way. And I went from feeling really terrible about myself and feeling really shy and weird. And I had a weird relationship with my voice. I didn't talk very much. And um, I ended up being really talented in cross country. And I ended up going just like above and beyond what was sort of expected of me, kind of beyond what the coaches were really asking from us. And I just became kind of obsessive in some ways, but I became, league champ, as you said, and went on to run in college on scholarship.
UC Davis, right?
Right.
Yep.
And so there's a huge sort of metamorphosis that happened as a product of cross country running, and I've always been very physical and very coordinated. Like I'm definitely someone who like uses my body, and I feel very confident and good about my body. I'm also like a really serious musician, and that's a whole other story. But there's all this sort of embodiment of like skill and sort of feeling oneself and knowing how to use one's body that's very prominent for me, and that's kind of faded over time as something that I'm really actively doing because that's, as you age, it's just kind of what happens. And especially because of the pandemic, this is the worst shape I've ever been in, definitely, but still in pretty good shape. But yeah, that's been my experience. It's sort of like a more traditional masculine embodiment, like not super traditional. It's not like I was a football player or a bodybuilder or something like that, whatever. But my experience with getting to know my unconscious, my experience of getting to know my body has been one of being like star athlete and musician. And now I've moved on to a sort of meta realm, I would say, of kind of bringing all those things together and combining them into sort of this thing, whatever this is that is happening on the internet, whatever you and I are doing now, whatever the Stoa is, whatever my series on YouTube is going to be. It's all sort of combining all these things together into some sort of philosophy that I think could help people. And that's where I'm at now.
I mean, that's the thing. That is such a shift. And like I really want to know, because again, like I asked you like what you may be interested in talk about, and just stuff like the meaning of life, and you explore stuff like I remember, and you talked about your origin story for the Golden Shadow podcast, right? And said you're on a long hike with your friend Alyssa. Talk about the usual stuff like synchronicity, supernatural, God, and nature, reality. And then, I believe what I read, you were getting a bachelor's of science in what was it, exercise biology. And so how did that trajectory, how did it morph? How did it like get into where it is right now?
I mean, this ties into, again, this sort of like satellite outcast archetype for me, is that I always hated school. I would have been better off if I'd been unschooled if you're familiar with like that term of sort of
Yeah.
some sort of alternative learning trajectory. Because again, the physicality is a huge part of that. Like I've always been someone who really learned by doing things, and did it hands-on learning has always been a thing for me. And I was always a troublemaker, and I always had problems with my teachers. I always had a problem with authority. The kind of the bullshit meter is really strong in me, where I kind of feel like whenever I read something that seems like bullshit happening, I really feel really repelled by it. And I want to like stay away from it. But it just kind of turned out that like everything I experienced as far as like structured school and working and jobs and stuff like that, it's like it all just felt like such bullshit to me. And that's been something that I've struggled with my entire life, is, you know, kind of like we were talking about in the meeting yesterday, is sort of this like rejection of game A.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you might say is like I've always it was never even a question. Even as a young person, there was this huge rejection of game A, of just kind of like, this is all bullshit and I don't like it. I don't know what to do with it. But I was really smart and really talented, so I just sort of like went through school and just like got straight A's and kind of, you know, did my athlete thing and did my art thing, and went to college and ran cross country, and was just on path to essentially like go to med school.
And
then,
med school. Wow.
Yeah, it's like taking all the hard classes, you know, taking like the hard like organic chemistry and human anatomy and stuff. And yeah, just college just sort of ended, and I just like didn't know what the fuck I was doing, and I had no interest in going to med school. I had no interest in like really becoming a physical therapist. That's something that I would tell people, like, yeah, I guess I might become a physical therapist eventually, like because you don't know what else to tell people. You don't know what to say. They ask you what's your path, and it's like, well, my path is something that sounds like it makes no sense or sounds crazy, or I can't explain it. So yeah, maybe PT, maybe physical therapy, but I honestly just never felt serious about it, and I never followed through with it. And I volunteered in a hospital for a while doing physical therapy, like assisting with that, and I just hated it, and I just hated the feel of being in the hospital, and everything just sort of felt kind of broken to me. Like, this hospital doesn't work very well. People are so unhealthy. Why are all these people here getting physical therapy? Why can't they just take care of themselves? And like, anyways, it's an attitude problem that I've always had. It's overzealous. It's a rejection of what feels sort of inauthentic. And this demand for authenticity is like, it's virtuous, but it also just like destroys your life, because it's like, what are you going to do if you can't do anything that remotely feels inauthentic? It's like everything has some aspect of inauthenticity to it. You have to accept that, and I'm just like, I don't accept it. It's like, well, you're just never gonna do anything then. And so anyways, so that's why I've been a bartender for a very long time. And I was a bartender until the pandemic hit, and then
that's not a great pastime, right?
And that was over. It's like, you know, what do I do now? And it's like, well, we'll just do whatever you feel like you should do. And that's what this is.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, I want to build on that, but literally I have to upgrade my Zoom right now or the meeting's gonna end. So please bear with me while I get out my credit card.
You're gonna upgrade it live?
Yeah. You know what? This morning, if I keep this in the episode, I might actually do that.
Yeah, you should. You should. Like time's running out, Albert. Like, you have 6 minutes.
How dare you?
You have to upgrade before time runs out.
This is the merits of live streaming, of recording. Feel free to chat.
Let's see. Christian said the divine feminine.
Yeah, like this could be part of the recording. Yeah, if you want.
Yeah. How have I explored the divine feminine, and which energy had to be worked on more? I mean, they said actually what feels more alive for me is the potential for communitas. Yeah, so I'll address both. The divine feminine. It's interesting because there's sort of like this yin yang thing going on in people, and there's also sort of a masculine feminine thing going on in people, and they're not necessarily the same thing. They're related, but I feel like often what we're calling sort of like the feminine side of men is actually sort of like more of a yin function, and what we're calling the masculine side of women is kind of more of a yang function. And what does that mean? It means like the yin is sort of like receptive, the yang is sort of active. And so if we think of like the receptive man, he's one who is oh, you did it, Albert.
Yes,
you did it. Upgraded.
Go ahead, continue. I want to hear this amazing answer.
So masculine yin is something that I think has been really absent in our culture for a very long time. And masculine yin is like, what does it mean to be masculine and virtuous and strong, but to be yin? It means to be patient. It means to be reserved. It means to kind of sit in the background and wait and know what needs to happen when it happens, and being okay not being in charge, being okay just sort of letting things happen and just going with the flow in some regards, letting things come to you. And we think of these things like, well, that's not masculine. And the thing is, like, it is masculine. It's just not the kind of masculinity that's really been encouraged, or let's say it's not the kind of masculinity that's sort of taken off and built civilization in some sense. So it's kind of unexpressed. But the masculine yin, or kind of like the feminine, let's say, is something that's always been very natural to me as a child. And I was very much a sort of yin child. Like, it was very quiet, patient, observing very much. I wasn't just trying out. I wasn't going out and trying to just like knock skulls together and like, break bones and sort of just like be that crazy like young boy. I was like very calm as a child, and people would comment on that. Like, I'd go to the dentist as like a 5-year-old, and the dentist would be like, "Wow, Arran was such a good patient. He just sat through the whole thing and didn't complain or anything. He's just like so calm." But that side of me kind of disappeared in middle school, because I struggled in middle school in a lot of ways, and I felt weak, and I felt like I wasn't sure what was happening to me, and I couldn't make sense of my life. And so this sort of yang side of me kind of had to take over. And the truth is, like, maybe it didn't have to take over, but to me it felt like it did. And so this more like aggressive, powerful, in charge man kind of took over and banished the feminine and yin sort of away. And so I became this sort of like overcompensating, aggressive, intense, almost tyrannical masculine in order to become strong, in order to like take charge of my life, in order to kind of get what I wanted and kind of like pursue the girls. But it went too far. And so in the last 5 years, a big part of my experience has been trying to rediscover the masculine yin, which is like how to be less controlling, how to be less aggressive, how to be less, demanding of structure, or demanding that things go a certain way, or trying to punch all your problems to solve them, as opposed to caressing your problems, or letting them unravel themselves and being patient. That's something that I've had to work on a lot. So that's been kind of my experience over time, is having to learn how to channel the feminine energy, or let it come back to me. And there's somewhere inside me there's like this banished child. There's like this like little boy that I can't find anymore. That is like, everything is so business all the time now, that like the little boy who is like loving and sort of shy and fun and sort of receptive, he's like hidden somewhere. He's been repressed. And so that's been a lot of my shadow work, you might say, is trying to recover the little boy, who I would say is sort of like the feminine boy, or the yin boy.
Yeah, I mean, that I totally resonate with that. And it's so funny, because not only do I see so many parallels with your story individually, I see in the greater collective society. It's just like, it's like when I was like, as much as like I come off as super brash and all this stuff, like a lot of it, I don't know. It's funny because it's just like you, like I was bullied. Like, I'm not saying, but like my personal story, I was bullied horribly. Like I was picked on. I didn't say anything. Like people, I would just be sitting in class. People would be like throwing spitballs into my hair, and I would just sit there and I would just take it. And then finally, and after a while, I just like, I'm not gonna take this anymore. And I had to activate that yang, and And finally I would be like, no, like they would mess with me and I'll just start just throwing punches I start being super aggressive. This is why I got into like weightlifting and all that. And like it got to a point where I actually was locked up for 3 years as a teenager because of repeated aggravated assaults on police officers. Now, talk about activating your yang,
Wow.
right? So this is like this when I like when you see like I know I have flashes of like this shadow, right? And like I'm very afraid of it coming out because I don't want people to see it, but there's a very dark shadow there that goes beyond just being picked on and kind of fight back. And again, we see this in society where it's like like we talk about like game B and how we can't get out of game A right now because of the game theoretic dynamics. It's just like the structure is built where like these dominating figures, right? It's like they are trying to dominate you because they don't want to be dominated themselves, and it's just the yang. It just builds on itself. And what we're trying to do societally, and this goes back to the meta-modern masculinity, is to, okay, we don't have to do this anymore because we're destroying ourselves, and we can go back to that yin, the softer side of ourselves, whether that's, you could call it the meta-modern masculinity, or you could call it tapping into the feminine, going back to the inner child. We were talking about last night in the session with everyone at the Stoa. We were talking about how how we could be a child again, how we could go back to feeling awe and wonder and not having to collapse from a wave to a particle. We could still be in this constantly emergent state.
Yeah.
What I wanted to go to next, right? So yeah, I mean, unless you had to say something there.
No, I mean, I'm just
okay.
you just said some things that make me so curious, but we'll save that for my show. I think.
Okay, yeah. Take notes. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So what I talk to now, it's just, okay, so you were talking about, so we were talking about this before we almost ran out of time because my credit card is again, when you're talking about how you're a rebel and how you hated school. Again, in high school I had like a C- average. In fact, I wouldn't have graduated if, again, I was locked up. The only reason I graduated because while I was locked up, all I had to do was sit in class, write a couple things, and then, here, you could get a diploma. I was like, okay, that's the only reason why I graduated. Otherwise, I would not have graduated. I hated school. Part of the reason why I hated school is because my 5th grade teacher, basically, like, he was like, he was like a really insecure, like retired professional baseball player who wound up being a school teacher. And he just picked on me. Like, he just massacred me, like psychically, because, he was like, he was like projecting, and he was, because I was a smart kid who always raised my hand, so he just destroyed my love for learning. I was terrible in school. I got locked up and all that stuff, and then I went on this journey where I hated school. I couldn't fit into the system. And never mind, even if that wouldn't happen, I was always a rebel. So I went on this journey. I was actually, in 2019, I almost opened up my own vegan donut shop because I was just like, I really like donuts. I'm a vegan. There's not enough vegan donuts. I'm going to open a vegan donut shop. So I started working at the number one French bakery in the area. Then I moved to the number one donut shop in the area. And I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. And this is what I was doing. It's like, you're being a bartender, kind of just like, I don't want to do this. But like, and even me, like, I was doing the best I could, was opening up a vegan donut shop. But I was like, dude, I'm like, that doesn't fit either. I am so glad that fell through because the landlord was like, okay. Landlord was like, you know what? I don't feel like doing this. Okay. And I'm like, thank God that happened, because now I'm here. So I want to know, like, so, okay, you're like, you know what? This game A stuff, I can't stand this stuff. I'm doing this bartending stuff while I'm just, just trying to, I guess, figure things out. And you're going into, of course, and you had like this backlog of Jung and all this stuff, right? And you're deep into all this stuff already. So how exactly did you find the Stoa, and what exactly what was the attractor to the Stoa from what that you were studying?
So I feel like I was already on this trajectory for a while. It's kind of building towards this. There's certainly a time in 2016 where I sort of decided that I wanted to shift from essentially music. I was like recording a lot of music, and I was really passionate about that. I also wanted to build community. I also like became more interested in sort of the potential to build community and what that meant around 2015, 2016. And so there was a lot of shifting towards, I think, just sort of like a place of wisdom, more away from sort of like more youthful obsession and more towards just a place of wisdom, of trying to, again, kind of combine things into some sort of like a meta entity of bringing all the things I'm doing together. And anyway, so I was already on that trajectory. I was already writing a lot. I was interested in writing a book. But in 2017, someone who was familiar with my ideas and my philosophy and the work I was doing, he was like, I heard this guy on the Joe Rogan podcast, and like he sounds just like you are, and like he has the same ideas. He sounds like everything you're saying, like it seems like you would agree with him. And I'm like, who's this? He's like, oh, his name's Jordan Peterson. And I was like, I've never heard of him. And he's like, well, take a listen. And I'm like, okay. And so I listened to the Rogan podcast, and my friend was right. It was like, oh my God, like, yeah, this guy, this is me. That's how I feel. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way when they hear Peterson, honestly. It's kind of like, yes, he's saying everything that I think, everything that I feel and believe. He's way more articulate than I am, and he knows how to express it better. But like, absolutely, I agree with everything he's saying. And it was kind of this eye-opening thing, because I was like, is this guy popular? It's like, yes, he's becoming very popular. Yeah. It's like, so there's all these people who are interested in these ideas and all these people who want to talk about them. And it's like, yes. It's like, that's interesting. And so it was very encouraging. It was kind of a boost of like, there's a whole world emerging that maybe already was emerging, and maybe it just wasn't clear to me, but Peterson definitely demonstrated that like there is something happening on the internet where there's a bunch of people who are discovering that there's all this high quality information that's free, and they're discovering each other. And it's sort of like this kind of enlightenment that I feel like it's sort of happening on the internet. Yeah. It sounds a little extreme, because it sounds as if people are like getting actually enlightened, but just like the interest is there. The sort of sense making is something that people are really interested in. And that was kind of like just, kind of like a light bulb. So I pursued that more. I tried to kind of get my community of like friends sort of like, do you guys want to talk about this stuff? Or are you guys interested in sort of like meeting up and figuring out some of these ideas? And then it was like, no, they're not interested.
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, okay, well, who is interested? And so I found a meetup group. And it was actually in the same town as me. It was actually a few blocks away, which is pretty strange. And then through that meetup group, everyone in the meetup group was exploring various things. Someone brought up Verbaki. And then I checked out Verbaki, and I was like, wow, this is really great too. I'm like really into this. And then someone mentioned at the meetup group that Verbaki was going to do this event. And it was like a Zoom event. And I was like, okay, like that's interesting. And I went to it. It was at the Stoa. And again, it was like, okay, there's more. Like there's more to this world, and there's more people here, and these people are like me, and these people want to talk about these things. And there is an interest in building community that is absent from my, real life. And so the Stoa immediately, to me, was just like, there's so much potential here, and this is so interesting. And like, I don't know what this phenomenon is, but it's new. I think this is like a new thing that's never existed before. And it could be something increasingly big, increasingly important, not necessarily like, like a revolution, like take over the world, but like the idea of like people need this, and they're going to be searching for it increasingly as time goes on. And I feel like this is going to become more important. And it also kind of seems like an alternative for the failing educational systems that I felt like I was sort of dragged through and hated, which is like education is fucked up. It doesn't work. And it made me feel terrible about myself in all these ways. And I think something like this is going to replace those things eventually. Let's see if it does. And so that's kind of where we're at right now with my interpretation of the Stoa.
Yeah. And my trajectory in the Stoa, people who listen to these episodes, is basically I was into Daniel Schmachtenberger's work. And again, Daniel Schmachtenberger, I am shocked at like the Schmachtenberger hunger that happened during COVID. Because like literally like 7 out of 10 people who I talk to, they're like, oh, I found the Stoa because of Schmachtenberger. And it's just crazy. Again, like I stated before, it's just like, this thing hit, I had some time to reflect, and I was like, you know what? For some reason, I have a hankering for some Daniel Schmachtenberger podcast. I was like, where the hell did that come from, right? And then and then like I started looking at stuff. I found the Rebel Wisdom podcast, then the YouTube channel, and then I see, Peter Lindbergh and Daniel Schmachtenberger at the Stoa. I was like, what the hell is the Stoa? I go to the Stoa, and then I start seeing people like, wait a minute, these aren't like stuffy old middle-aged people who are at the Stoa. They're people like me. They're like, oh my God, like I saw like Anjan, like lovable Anjan, right? Like I remember like seeing and I'm just seeing Anjan just like asking a question. It's like, hey, what's this? Oh, I don't understand. Could you explain that again? I don't think I understand. Could you explain that again? I was just like, oh wow, like I could just go in there and just kind of like be with just like regular curious people. I mean, really smart people, like people who think outside the box, but not necessarily like the super, academic, super, intellectual types, just like real people who want to learn about this stuff. And that's what got me into the Stoa. And what I want to know is, what do you think this is? And like this goes back to the origin of the Golden Shadow. We were talking these topics you're talking about, synchronicity, supernatural, the nature of reality. It's just like, what is this exactly? Like, and this goes into Peter talking about the daemon, and in his most recent Substack articles, he's literally talking about being demonically possessed and having like some sort of psychic break. And I'm gonna bring myself into it. What I'm doing with Noetic Nomads, I honestly feel like I've been activated. What I do every day, I do like 5 times a day, and I also do meditation, breathing exercises. I kind of just put my hands to my body, to my heart, and to my gut. And then I breathe in and I say, I accept. And I just say, like, I'm your vessel. Flow through me. What needs to be done? And then I've been active. And then like around like September, I just like, oh, I got it. And I've been flying. This thing has been going on for 2 weeks. And I'm like, it's just like, I'm just flying. Like I'm just going. And there's something here. Like, so what I want to know is, there's something, I mean, COVID has triggered a lot in people. It's triggered a lot everywhere. And we don't even know. We don't even know what's bubbling right now. Like, just there's things bubbling around everywhere that we're unaware of. What I want to know is, what exactly did this moment trigger? Like, what are the forces what are all the forces that are meeting at this fulcrum? And then what is this thing that's being unleashed? Is it is it unconscious? Is it just something, is it primordial? Is it something greater than what we think of as natural?
Yeah, there is sort of a convergence happening where there's a lot of forces that are sort of colliding right now. And it's so complex that it's really hard to know, like, what is actually going on right now in the world? What's happening to us? Like, are we on a trajectory of destruction? Kind of feels like that. Are we on a trajectory of utopia? Yeah, it kind of feels like that. It's like, can it be both? It's like, I don't know. But the pandemic, I mean, it's a tragedy in so many ways, but it's also an opportunity. And there's been a serious demonstration, at least because of the pandemic, of the way the world could be, perhaps the way the world could shift, and the way that people could come together if they actually wanted to. It's like if people really wanted to come together and really wanted to sort of figure out what to do and how to solve these problems, it's like they could actually do it. And you can see that with what the pandemic has done to people. It's like, I mean, the governments have dropped the ball in all these ways, and a lot of people are just, behaving in a way that's like really not cool and not constructive, not helpful. But at the same time, it's like, everyone is united and linked up in this experience, and they're getting on the internet and they're linking up with each other.
Yep.
And you can just sort of see it's like everyone could be networked. They really could. And if somehow people really had the will to fix the problems in the world, they could do it. That's like, it's clear that it could happen. So why is it not happening? And, you know, people have all kinds of answers, but to me, the most foundational answer is that people don't know how to communicate. Like, that's really at the foundation of all this. Is it's like, I don't think it's people that are evil. I really don't think it's just like, you know, the lords of darkness just like controlling the world and like brainwashing. It's like, no, like at the core, it's just basic human psychology. People don't know how to talk to each other. That's really at the foundation. It's like, and if you can solve that, you can actually solve all the other problems. So if you want to solve global warming, there's all these ideas of like, well, just go solve global warming, like just go solve it. It's like, it's not going to happen unless people know how to talk to each other. That needs to happen first. How do people learn how to talk to each other? If people learn how to talk, they can cooperate, then we can solve things, no problem. But people don't know how to talk to each other, and it's getting worse. People, like my own two parents, I would say, in many ways, in the last few years, it's like they're having more and more trouble talking to each other. It's like, why is that happening? It's like they're becoming polarized from each other because of strange things happening in the world, strange politics, strange things they're reading. They have separate feeds and they're reading different things in their feeds. And it's kind of like there's this like divide that's happening between people. And it's like, this is what's wrong with the world. Like, it's not the only thing that's wrong with the world, but like at its foundation, I would say what's wrong is people are not talking and they don't know how. So the phenomenon I think that we're experiencing with getting on Zoom and talking like you and I are right now, I think the Stoa, that's one part of this is like, it's a lot of people who recognize this problem. They recognize like this really is kind of like at the core is like people don't know how to talk. They don't. And it's like, what can we do about that? And it's like, well, let's start strategizing. Let's figure it out. Let's practice. We can practice on each other. How do we talk to each other? And that's a force that I think is going to be really important if we're going to save the world in some way. Is the sort of the contagious feeling of communication. If you start talking to people, it feels amazing, and you sort of like want to share it, and it's like, who else can I communicate with? You. Let's communicate, and it can spread, and that's going to be really important. And I think that's more important than a lot of other more like obvious things that need to happen, like, you know, like just like solar power. It's like, yeah, of course, like, yeah, great, but like, where's the political will for that?
Exactly, yeah.
And you know, and you know, racism, like that. This is something that's like really salient. Like racism, we gotta solve racism. It's like you can't do that unless you learn how to talk to people, and we're not talking. So that's the phenomenon that I see. That's part. It's like it's a sense-making phenomenon. People want to make sense, and they want to learn how to communicate. That's part of it. There's also just all the same universal things that are happening here, which is like people are craving community. They always crave community. People are tribal. They want a tribe. Tribalism can be you know, pernicious. I think it can also be virtuous. Yes, and I think that we crave it. And so the tribal energy is happening here. People are learning about each other. They're becoming kind of more intimate in some ways, like in an intellectual way, in an emotional way, maybe not in a physical way, certainly. But that's also something that's happening here is people are rediscovering the tribe and the power of it, and rediscovering education and the power of it. And they're all these things are kind of linking up to return us to a place that I would say we feel like we're meant to be, which is in communion with each other, teaming up to solve problems, lifting each other up, like just bringing each other into personhood. All those things are so powerful, and they're kind of all happening at once. And also just hope. It's like there's a lot of hope in discovering something like the Stoa and talking to someone like you, and you know, you feel that hope of like, maybe we can solve things. Like maybe there is hope. Maybe there is that light at the end of the tunnel that we can get to. And people are really lacking that all over the place. There's a lot of feelings of no hope. There's a lot of feelings of just doom. It's like we're done for. And hope can be a really powerful thing that it's cliche to throw out there, but like if you can give people hope, like you can change the world. And I think that there's a lot of hope in this realm. Like I feel that, like listening to Peterson, I don't want to sound too much like a Peterson fanboy because I don't think I am, but Peterson gave me hope. It was just kind of like, oh my God, like this is still a real thing. Like this is still something that exists. The world isn't totally bullshit. It feels that way, but it really isn't. There is something that's real, and I want to go find it. So.
Wow, that is amazing, Arran. Thank you so much. And it's just like, I don't want to come off like oh, I'm some cocky genius who saw it all, but it's like everything you just said. We talk about community, communication, you know, giving people hope, getting people together so they can actually solve problems. And I'm like,
yeah,
I feel like that's what I'm doing with Noetic Nomads. Like that's why I did it. Like for speaking like hope, and hope is very corny nowadays. Everyone, you know, it's so cool to be cynical, right? If you look at the logo of Noetic Nomads, right, is if you see the North Star, right, the bright North Star right at the top, and it's just like that's hope. That's like there's something here. You go to the website, it's just like Noetic Nomads is a community of dreamers and change makers, right? And just like we're navigating and making sense of the unfolding meta crisis in order to co-create a more beautiful future. So that's what I'm doing, and it's weird because like I was talking about, I was like, I felt it is just so funny. Like these forces, like they force me to go this way, and I sensed the need. I could even be like, we sense the need. I just tapped into this collective intelligence, this field of information or whatnot, and I was just like, oh, this is what needs to be done, and I went like, boom, and again, like on like, Arran, I mean, you probably saw my little tirade against the Stoa's lack of women on Discord maybe a few weeks back. Yeah. And that was bad. It was, I know it was really bad. That was shadow coming out, but it was coming from a pure place. I was like, where are the women? Why are we stuck in our head all the time? And then last Friday, again, like I was talking about the Nora Bateson, Rhea Beck, and all the females came on, and they literally repeated exactly what I was saying before. So I was like, I was tapping in, and it's just like, even like the great Peter Lindbergh, you know, he has his own daemon, as he calls it, but then I got my own thing. I see it as the void. Arran, I'm sure you read a lot of my tweets sometimes where it seems like I'm just like channeling something. Like I just give like these pithy one-liners. I'm just like just channel. I'm just going deep, and I'm just channeling, and it just comes up. I was like, oh, this needs to be done. So yeah, I mean, I guess my point here is just, there's something here, and I sense it. You sense it. Christian, you're here. You sense it. You're not. You're here for a reason. I mean, and this is happening, and we don't even know what's happening. And this emergent conversation that you and I are having, I was like, wow, look at all this amazing stuff coming out of it. I don't know what to expect. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna go, and that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, the point about women, I think, is pretty spot on, and that's, I mean, it's something I've been saying since I first started going to the Stoa.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, because like part of why the Stoa seemed cool and powerful at first when I first started going was that there were women there.
Oh.
And it's not just simply just like boing, like women, like, you know, it's like there's like that can easily happen in group situations, like, oh, there's girls here, like tight, like, but that's not really what I'm talking about. It's like this space, and you know, the people who are paying attention to Peterson, also a lot of people who are like kind of really activated by this, like it's a very masculine energy. It's mostly men, but you can feel the power when you get women in the space, and you can feel the perspective they have is really important. And that like, even if we're not a physical in real life community, it's like the feminine energy is still really imperative. And if it goes away, this thing's not going to survive. So, I mean, like Raven, for instance, Raven's fucking brilliant. You know, and she would speak at the Stoa early on, and I was like really blown away. I was like, wow, like thank God we have girls who like are smart and they're interested in this stuff and they want to talk about it. My friend Alyssa that I do the podcast with has been a huge influence on me, and it's been really, really important to giving me this other way of looking at things that I never would have otherwise. It really balances me out, and that's like partly why the podcast works. Is like we provide a good balance for each other. But the female voice is one that in many ways in our society, I mean, it's true for the masculine voice as well, but the strong female voice in our society is one that is mostly pathological, I would say. It's like mostly sort of being destructive and sort of driving things in a direction where it's like, wait, like that's, hold on, like you're going a little over the top and like that's not even true. Whereas like the virtuous female voice, same with the masculine voice, like the masculine voice in our culture the same way. It's just like, this is pathological. We need like the virtuous masculine voice. But at the Stoa, part of the reason the Stoa works because there's a lot of women, and that's really important. And if it could be at least half women, that would be great.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
If it was more than half women, that would be great. That would be better, I think, than mostly men.
Yes.
And so I always get really excited at the idea of getting more women on board, and more races. Absolutely. I mean, the diversity is really important. It's true. This whole realm is definitely very much like straight white men, like absolutely. And that's unfortunate. Not to say that straight white men are like bad, because of course they're not. They're really brilliant. They're doing a lot of really, really important good things. But it is true is that the women are missing, and the other races are missing, and it's just exciting to get those in. And it's like we need more voices. It's stronger with more voices from more perspectives, more eyes looking at different things. It's always much more powerful. That consilience of just having all these different perspectives is really, really important. They all balance each other out. So, I don't think you're thinking about needing more women at the Stoa. It sounded crazy at all. It was just like, I've been saying that too. Like, so.
Except you weren't nearly as caustic as I was.
No,
and just straight attacking Peter. Yeah.
My approach is a little more reserved than yours, I think. But
yeah, I mean, it definitely works for you. Trust me. And again, same thing with you. When I heard Raven speak, oh my God, talk about mental boner. It's funny, the first Stoa session I'm at, everyone, if you want to see, it's like a collector's edition, like the first appearance of Spider-Man. If you want to see the first appearance on Albert on the Stoa, go to the Samo Burya's live players. I believe it was back in June. It was one of those episodes. Like I go on, Raven's like, Albert Kim, do you want to ask a question? I'm like, oh yes, Samo, what you're saying is awesome. You gave me a mental boner. Like, I just started going on. If you want to see that, that's my first appearance. And like, I love Raven. She's amazing. And you brought up Alyssa. I swear to God, like on Philosopher Queens on the first episode, right? I was there with Rachel and Raven, and then like they're just like, Alyssa, you're being quiet. Would you like to speak? And Alyssa was like, yeah. I would like that. And she's like, brrr, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, she is so good. And then Raven was like, oh my God, I love you, Alyssa. And then she was like the next guest. Like, I mean, Alyssa is amazing. Actually, real quick, how do you know Alyssa? I'm very curious.
Alyssa and I went to high school together.
I see.
Yeah, so we've known each other for, I guess we've really been like friends for about 12 years, but we've definitely gotten closer over time, and we're living together right now, and so that's partly why the podcast is able to happen, is because we're locked down in the same house, and so the podcast was something that we could do while being locked down. But she has her own stuff that she's been working on for a while. For the last like 5 years, she's sort of quit her cushy job at a tech company, essentially, to pursue.
Sounds familiar to me.
Pursue a path of like healing, and it's become more intellectual over time, and she's gotten more into Jung over time. But she's pretty brilliant, and she's really, really shy, and she does kind of do this thing where she's sort of like sitting like in the background, but then then she'll like open her mouth to speak, and then she'll like say all this like really brilliant stuff.
We're
just like, what, how did you do that? Where did that come from? So yeah, I'm hoping that she will get more of an audience over time, and that we can be mutually supportive in our respective projects, because I think they do mirror each other pretty well as far as like a feminine and masculine kind of thing, which is partly why the duo, I think, is so powerful.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you two definitely have something special there. And like Christian again, yeah, he's like, he brought out, also shout out to Maybe, can't forget Maybe, and also
For
bringing
sure,
in,
yeah.
bringing in more races. I'll bring in the Asian. And it's like, yeah, that's also what I was talking about. I want to bring in everyone. Like, I have my mind, I have my, my sights set on everyone who's not at the Stoa. If you're not being represented at the Stoa, I'm like, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what I want to talk about next is the torch.
Mm.
Oh my God. When I saw that first episode, I wasn't just blowing smoke up your ass, and I was like, so good. And the Children of Men intro, amazing. And I mean, okay, look, of course, I'm going to link this. Everyone check it out. I mean, really, it's fantastic. And just a brief preview is basically, it starts off with a scene from the Children of Men. And for those who don't know, Children of Men is basically a movie where a bleak humanity, people can't have children anymore, and because of that, people have lost hope, and like society is in decay. And you talk about the torch, which is a beautiful metaphor about how it's about this genetic and cultural continuity, which gives people meaning. And again, like, and you pointed out, and I guess I'm sure a lot of people see, there's analogs with what's going on in the real world today.
Yeah.
And like, I'm very curious as to like what inspired the torch, and how, and what you see, like what are the parallels with the modern situation?
Yeah, the torch is a philosophy that's sort of I've developed over time. I've been talking about the torch as a concept for at least 10 years to people.
Wow.
As sort of thinking like, this is kind of like
in the making. Yeah.
This is kind of like the way things are. It's like, this is the way things, this is the way that humans actually sort of arrange their lives, is sort of around this thing, which is like, they're trying to like kind of like protect something. They're kind of trying to like build something, and they pass it on, and it just sort of, that thing keeps traveling through time, even though the individual dies. And it's sort of like this like anti-narcissistic philosophy that like, we kind of, there's so much individualism in our culture, and there's so much kind of like this feeling of like, yay, you do your thing, like it's all about you, like indulge yourself. And we've really bought into that in a really serious way, and it's good to explore who you are, and it's good to like understand your identity, but it's such a short-sighted way of being, because it's like, you're gonna die someday, like everyone's gonna die. Exactly. And so like this sort of feeling of like, well, I'm just gonna do my thing, and I'm just gonna try to like have as much fun and experience as much as I possibly can and until I die. It's like, well, why? What's the point of that? And you see that like, if people actually try to make sense of their life, and they try to actually think about what they should do, it always comes down to this thing of like, be more than just your physical body. Have an influence on people that's positive. Have children. It's like, people really want to have children, and it's like, why do you want to do that? Like, don't you think about why? Exactly. And there's and it's like, so people want to have children, but they also want to have some kind of legacy. People want to do something that's good for the world. If we're talking about climate change, if we're talking about nuclear war, or that's like, why do we want to solve these dangers? It's like, for the future, for future generations. And it's like, we say that, but then it's almost like, then we don't act like it. It's like, yeah, we got to solve climate change, and but like, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to have any kids, and I just like want to do my thing, and like just like live my crazy lifestyle. And I think people just find that like it ends up not being very meaningful. That what's really meaningful is taking on responsibility for the world, kind of trying to lift other people up, and trying to build something. And that might be something that's like physical, or it might be something that's more kind of like immaterial, like a philosophy or an idea or a community, but to build something that is going to outlast you, exactly. Like plant this is a quote. I can't remember what the exact quote is, but like, you want to plant trees that you know won't grow until after you die. Like your life should be about that. And that is sort of absent in so many ways from our way of thinking about our lives is this notion of continuity, that you are actually inheriting something from the past that you need to protect and pass it on to the future. And I think in many ways, the sort of boomer generation kind of fucked that up in some ways. I mean, it's not their fault. I don't want to blame anyone for that. It's hard to know like the reasons for what happened, but it's like the whole idea of like responsibility and kind of something that you need to inherit and protect and pass on, it kind of got obliterated in this sort of explosion of just like liberation and sexual freedom and privilege and rights, and everyone's a sovereign individual and just do your thing. It's like, that's all very important, but we sort of can get lost in that and forget that we're part of something that transcends us, and that's something that's billions of years old and that might keep lasting for billions of years. Like, we don't really know. But that's really what that's just something that my philosophy has developed over time to think of life that way. It's like, that's what life actually is. That's what humans actually do. And this series is just trying to kind of argue that and provide evidence for why I think it's true.
Yeah, I mean, that really resonates with me, because it's like, if you people haven't heard by now, if you haven't like watched my or listened to my previous episode, I let out the bombshell that I'm actually a virgin, and I'm a voluntary virgin, because I'm weird like that. Like, that's just how I am. Like, I'm totally fine with that. And I spoke with Tia in the second episode about like, and she's heavily into the tantra and like talk about the divine feminine. She's deeply into that. And she was talking about how the energy to create a child is the same energy that can be used to co-create a new paradigm. Just like, it's like, why am I like this? Like, why do I not care about that kind of stuff? And it's just like, I care about all this other stuff, but it's because it's just like, why do I have so much freaking energy? Why am I manic like this? And I was talking with her, she's like, yeah, it could be that you're channeling what should come out from the waist down, and you're just channeling it back up here. And then this is why it just bursts out. And like, I use that, like that, because a lot of that, like, if you want to get into the more kind of spiritual kind of side, it's kind of like that life force in Tantra. You like, when you just have like a regular orgasm, you're like expending that life force, like, right? But in the tantric tradition, you're having like this slow 24/7 orgasm all day long. It's like this circulating, and like, I'm doing the tantric breath, and I'm like, I'm sending this energy up my spine, and then I'm circulating back down like this. So, and it's just like, why do I care so much? Why do I care so much about Noetic Nomads? Why is it, am I like letting go of my ego and being like, you know what? I want to bring you on. I want you on. Tell me about your event. I'm going to post your event. Tell me what you want to do. Tell me about your work. I'll tell everyone about your project. I want to have a conversation with you. Why is it? It's because it's like, there's something greater that I'm trying to put forward into the future. Now, what exactly is it? Is it Noetic Nomads? Is it you, the group of people that I'm networking with? Is it humanity? Is it life? Is it is it the universe? Is it some collective will? Is it it's something that I'm channeling, that I'm like, this must move forward. And this is what I'm doing. My genes, unless I start like cloning myself, or one day I'm just like, you know what? Well, it's quite possible. I'm like, you know what? Let me get into a romantic relationship. I was like, yeah, let's just do it for the fun of it, right? I don't need to, but I was like, yeah, I feel like it. But unless that happens, this specific line is gonna die out. But whatever that I'm working on from now until then, I'm gonna work to push that forward. So yes, in a sense, like you made the metaphor, it's like I'm completing my leg of the relay. I'm taking the baton from what was before, and then I'm passing it on to whoever's here. And I don't know what exactly that is, but I'm doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean you're embodying it completely. I mean, and that's a big part of this philosophy that's so important to understand, that like it's not just about natalism. It's not just about having babies. Like everyone just have lots and lots of babies. That's the meaning of life. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. That's a very reductive way of looking at this idea. Is
Yeah.
like the torch is something that is not purely genetic, and it's not something that's kind of like made up either, or something that like is unnatural to us. It's like if you look at what humans do, because they're conscious, because they have culture, all their acts are sort of um, combining into this nebulous thing that is both genetic and cultural. That you're sort of like, maybe what you do is you develop an idea, and it's an important idea, and your idea is kind of like your baby, and it is so powerful that it brings all these other people onto the path. And your idea outlasts you. You die, but your idea goes on to the future, and like you have given birth to something. All that creative sexual energy you're talking about
Yeah.
is being repurposed in all these ways. And that's been the kind of the path of men for all of history. I mean, prehistory is like, men are sort of the wielders of culture. And so a lot of men don't breed. And that's the
Yeah.
way that
So
our biology is.
yeah,
They don't breed. But
you're
it's like,
right.
are they useless? It's like, of course they're not useless. Men are incredibly useful. They're incredibly powerful, but not all of them are going to have children. All the women usually do.
Yeah.
That's usually the pattern. But a lot of the men, they're kind of expendable, as you said. They might have roles like being the shaman, and the shaman doesn't really have children, but he has a very important role. He also contributes to this passing on of something. He helps the tribe survive. He plays a very special spiritual role, and he's very much like a father in that. Or someone is just building things like actual like structures to live in, or someone is hunting, or there's all kinds of ways in which you contribute to the collective energy of the tribe, which is this torch. And so everyone is part of that, and that's why it means all of your actions actually are either a gift to the future, or they're kind of taking away from the future. And so
Yeah.
it's not just like, oh, have kids and you're good. It's like, no, you have a responsibility with everything you do as being a parent to the world and being a parent to the future, like whether or not you have children. And that's sort of the philosophy that I think is not only meaningful, like you'll find a lot of meaning in that. You'll find like, oh, my life is meaningful if I understand this responsibility, but it's also something that would be good for the world. I don't want to say something ridiculous like my philosophy could save the world, but like what I mean is like, I do think that this way of looking at things is the truth. I just like plain and simple. I think it's true,
Yeah.
but I also think if you adopt this philosophy, like it is actually something that will help the world. And that's why I feel really passionate about it. Basically, it's like, I think this is real, and I think it's good, and I think this could change the way you think, in a way that's really important. It's what we need right now.
Beautifully put, Arran. This is why I wanted you on. This is why we're connecting. Clearly, there's something happening here that we're completely unconscious of. But yeah, there's a reason why we're talking right here. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. That was amazing. I don't even know if I want to ask the next question, because I feel like I should be paying you for this, because I'm asking for therapy. Or we could save it for the next recording. Newsflash, everybody. I will be appearing on Arran's show next. So stay tuned. But first, I was wondering if you would be so kind to indulge me. What exactly do you see in me? And what I mean by that is, like, I know you have, like, you could peer into people's souls. I'm not saying that, like, you could see everything about me, but I'm like, you have this, you could really, peer into the depths of people's characters and maybe what drives them. And again, like, you're deep into this meaning stuff with,
Yeah.
evolutionary psychology and all that. So I was just very curious, what forces do you see in me? What aspects, what shadow, what do you see coming out of me or through me, or what do you see me channeling? I don't know, however you want to answer that.
You are a passionate person, and you have been full of a deep love your entire life, a deep energy your entire life. And you are an unfortunate casualty of the system in which that love, that energy was not able to properly channel itself. And instead of being able to make connections with people and spread that love and harness that energy and what it build up into beautiful creations, the system kind of fucked you up and prevented you from doing that. And that is something that you've struggled with your entire life, I would say, is why can't my love energy make its mark? Why can't it land? Why can't it get to where it needs to go? Instead, it's just kind of like this thing that keeps misfiring and misfiring and misfiring, or there's all these obstacles. So I think that you are a deeply masculine person, and that's been something that has been both a burden and been something that is a virtue. And you haven't been able to fit in anywhere because of this. So I'd say the world has failed you in many ways. You're someone with so much potential, so much power, and so much goodness in you, but the world has failed you. Like it fails so many young men, I would say. It's like all this energy, all this positive energy, and it's all love. It's like, it's easy to throw it away as if it's something that's like kind of like destructive or like it's like violent, but it's like, no, like lover and warrior are intertwined in men. And if you don't find a way to channel that properly, all this energy just like released through the cracks, it blows out the sides, it doesn't get channeled properly. And I think that's been your experience. And I think that you have rediscovered as you've gotten older, that energy in a way that you can channel it properly. And I think right now, I think with the work you're doing, you're finding a way to channel it properly and have it land, have it get to where it needs to go. So something that not everyone has is that energy. People are tired. People don't have enough time or focus to really do anything besides take care of themselves. You clearly have more energy than you need personally. And that's what makes you like a father to the world. That's what gives you so much potential to be a parent to other people and to our entire existence, is you have more energy than you need. And you just need to let it overflow and hand it to people. And find a way to do that. And I think that's something that you've struggled with. And I think that's something that you are sort of figuring out now. It's a skill you're developing of how to put your energy into good packages and deliver it to people so they can actually receive them and accept it. And as Christian's saying in the chat, he's saying Albert energizes me, and it's like, exactly.
Thank you,
Christian. Like
you
are you energize other people. And this conversation, for instance, this was super easy to have. Like we just had like a 90-minute conversation, and it was like this was like a piece of cake. And I've had other chats. Not a bunch of chats, but I've had other chats where like I'm like struggling to like kind of get through like like 30 minutes where it's like, okay, like what are we talking about? Like I guess I can bring up this other random thing that we talk about, but you know, for you it's like the energy's there. All I got to do is just like plug my charger into you, like you're just like a socket, and it's like all right, like 100%. Like Albert's got all that energy I need. So
human
and that's
caffeine.
Exactly. And that's a beautiful gift that we really need, everyone benefits from. So that's your path. That's my analysis. I could be wrong, but
wow, Arran, that was incredible. I got a hurt in the feels. Oh my god, that was amazing. I felt the love. I really appreciate that. And again, you did reflect a lot with what I felt. And like, I'm glad that, like someone could see that. So I just want to say, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on, blessing us with this amazing episode. People, find out all about Arran's work. I'm going to put it on the show notes, but Arran, where can people find out more about you, social media links and whatnot?
So my name is Arran Rogerson, and that's Arran. If you type that into social media, you'll find me. If you type that into YouTube, you'll find my channel. The URLs are not very good way to find me, but on Twitter, I'm at Arran, at Arran. And that's my primary dispensary of wisdom on a daily basis right now, is Twitter. and you can find everything else through that. So that's what I'd say.
All right. You heard him here, folks. Mainline that wisdom into your system at Arran on Twitter. I'll put all the links in the show notes. Again, amazing. Thank you, Arran, for coming, blessing us with this. Thank you, Christian, for your awesome comments and your questions. And that's it, everyone. Tune in for another episode I'm going to be doing on Arran's podcast. I'll link to that as well. So don't worry, you can get a double dose of us real quick. Okay. And that's it for another episode of Noetic Nomads. Step up, everyone, because the world needs you. Okay. Peace out. Bye. Woo! Stop recording.